In this section, we're going to begin exploring how to add animations to our projects. Animations breathe life into any application. They're a great way to add pizzazz. They let the user know which parts of the app they can interact with. Whether you're adding a simple fade effect or a sophisticated slideshow, Vue is flexible enough to work with any type of animation. There are different ways to add animations. They usually fall into two categories, which are CSS animations and JavaScript animations. We'll be covering both. First, we'll start with CSS. There are two ways to add animations in CSS, which are through transitions and animations. We'll cover transitions since they're the simplest of the two. Before we get into the code, we have to understand the phases Vue will go through to add elements onto the page. Vue divides the animation into frames, which is how most animations are done. The first frame of the animation will have a class added to it called enterFrom. For example, if you call your animation fade, then the class name will be fadeEnterFrom. This class is removed after the first frame. It isn't alive for very long. Its purpose is to allow you to assign the element some initial properties. Along with adding a class at the beginning of the animation, Vue will add a class called enter2. This class is added at the final frame of the animation. This class isn't commonly used, but it's useful if you want to add some finishing touches to the element after the animation is finished. The last class that's added is the interActive class. This class is added to the element from the beginning of the animation to the ending of the animation. This includes the first and final frames. With these three classes, we can accomplish a lot. Vue will take care of adding the classes for you. Enough theory, let's dig into the code. I'm inside a new project. It's based on the default project from the Create Vue package. I've emptied out the components directory. I've stripped the app component to its three blocks. Pause the video so you can have the same setup as me. Alternatively, you can download the project files in the resource section of this lecture. If you decide to do so, you will need to install the modules with the npm install command. In this example, we're going to show you how to animate an element when it's entering or leaving the document. We'll use a button to toggle the animation. Inside the template, we're going to add a h2 tag with some text inside. Right above it, we'll add the button for toggling the animation. To toggle the animation, we'll need to keep track of if the element should be on the page or not. We'll store it as a data property. Define the data function for the component. Inside the object, create a property called flag with the initial value of false. With a flag set, we'll add the vIf directive to the h2 tag. The expression will be set to the flag data property. This expression will make the element toggleable. It'll always remain hidden because the flag property is set to false. Therefore, we'll need a way to flip the value. We'll list for the click event on the button element. Create an expression that'll set the flag property to its opposite value. This expression is a very simple JavaScript trick to toggle the Boolean value of a variable. With that set, let's test if everything is working. Switch to the browser. Initially, the message won't appear. If we press the button, then the message will pop in since the flag property is set to true. We can continuously toggle the value without a problem. Pretty simple example, nothing we haven't seen before. The element rendering on the page is quick and snappy. It's fine, but we could definitely improve it by adding a smooth transition. I think that'll be nice. To add an animation to an element, you need to use a component called transition. Go back to the editor. Inside the app component, we'll wrap the heading element with the transition component. This component will add the classes I mentioned at the very beginning of this lecture. The classes will get applied to the elements inside the transition component, specifically the root element or the heading tag we're wrapping the component with. By default, Vue will start the class name with v. Therefore, The three classes I mentioned earlier will be vEnterFrom, vEnterActive, and vEnter2. Most of the time, you may want to give a more descriptive set of names, a name relative to the animation currently happening. To customize the name, you'll have to set the name property on the transition component. The value for this will be the custom name. We'll set this to fade. The result of the class names will be fadeEnterFrom, fadeEnterActive, and fadeEnter2. The next step for us is to create the animation we want. Vue will not create the animations for us. It handles adding the classes whenever the element is toggled. Just because these classes are being applied to the element doesn't mean that an animation will automatically occur. We are responsible for taking it from there and specifying what will happen when these classes are applied. As the name suggests, we'll be adding a fade effect to the heading element. Inside the style block, we'll define the first class, fadeEnterFrom. This class is where you'll want to set the initial state of the element. This class gets added to the element when the element is entering the page. This class won't apply to elements that are leaving the DOM. There's another set of classes for that, but we'll get to those later. Adding a fade effect is simple. First, we have to make the element look invisible. We can use the opacity property and set it to 0. The opacity property will allow us to manipulate the opaqueness of an element. That's all we'll need to do for the initial phase. Next, we'll define the fadeEnterActive class. The EnterActive class is what's added for the entirety of the animation. This class is where we'll want to add the transition rules. We'll add the transition property with a value of all 0.25s linear. We won't bother with adding anything else. This property will create the fade effect we're seeking. We don't need to add the opacity property again because the default value for the opacity property is 1. 1 representing a fully opaque element. Since the fadeEnter class is removed after one frame, the browser's default CSS will get applied to the element. The opacity will transition from fully transparent to fully opaque. Let's give this a whirl. We'll refresh the page once more. Then we'll press the button again. As we press it, the element fades into view, which is what we wanted. However, it doesn't fade out. We're currently animating the element if it's entering the document. We haven't dealt with it when leaving the document. We'll have to add a different set of classes for when it's leaving. Vue will provide you with 3 classes. Instead of the keyword being enter, it's now leave. The leave_from class is added during the first frame of the animation. The leave_to class is added during the last frame of the animation. Lastly, the leave_active class is added during the entire animation, including the first and last frames. Once the animation is finished playing, the element is removed from the document. Adding these classes is pretty easy. We've already taken the first step to using them. The transition component will add the leave classes for you. It handles both entering and leaving transitions. The value in the name property will apply to leave classes. We can move right along to adding the styles. We'll add the selector fade leave in the style block. We'll set the transition to all .25s linear, same as above. In addition, we'll set the opacity to 0. We won't have to worry about the initial state of the element because most elements will have an opacity of 1 from the beginning. We need to take care of fading it out, which is what these 2 lines will accomplish. Let's refresh the page one more time and toggle the element. Both animations will work without a problem. This is the basics of using CSS transitions with Vue. There's one important point I want to highlight. It's not required to use every class available to you. Keep it simple and carefully think about what you're trying to accomplish. The classes are pretty clear, so you shouldn't have any problems with adding animation with CSS transitions. We'll leave it at that. I'll see you in the next one.